she joked. "The CEO's heart is ice." He heard, laughed softly and said, "Only until you melt it." Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't have said it, but the words were already out. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Design Studios, casting geometric shadows across the polished concrete floors. Seattle's skyline stretched beyond the glass, a testament to ambition and dreams built on coffee and determination. Inside the 32nd floor, the hum of creativity buzzed through open workspaces where minds crafted beauty from chaos. Julie Andres adjusted the collar of her navy blazer as she stepped off the elevator, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant low bun that framed her heart-shaped face. At 27, she possessed a quiet confidence that drew people in, the kind of woman who could diffuse tension with a genuine smile or organize chaos with a single spreadsheet. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with intelligence, and her warm, honey-toned skin seemed to glow under the studio's carefully curated lighting. "Morning, Julie," called Trevor from the design pit, his hands already stained with charcoal from his early sketches. "Ready for another day in paradise?" Julie laughed, the sound musical and authentic. Paradise would have better coffee than the break room brew. She made her way to her desk, a meticulously organized island of efficiency in the creative storm. As administrative coordinator, Julie was the invisible thread that held Meridian together, scheduling meetings that mattered, coordinating projects that transformed cities, and somehow making everyone feel heard in a company of 200 brilliant minds. Her phone buzzed, a text from her younger sister, Simone. "Girl, you better not be wearing that boring blazer again." Julie glanced down at her outfit and shook her head, typing back, "It's called professional. Look it up. Professional is fine. But you're 27, not 47. Live a little." Before Julie could respond, the elevator chimed with a distinct sound that made the entire floor unconsciously straighten. Anthony Bassett had arrived. At 38, Anthony commanded attention without trying. 6'2", with an athletic build that spoke of disciplined morning runs along Elliott Bay, he moved through the office with the quiet authority of someone who'd built an empire from vision and relentless precision. His dark hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place, and his steel-grey eyes seemed to catalogue everything while revealing nothing. Anthony wore his usual armor, a charcoal Tom Ford suit that fit like it was painted on, crisp white shirt, and a burgundy tie that cost more than most people's rent. But it wasn't the expensive clothes that made people nervous. It was the man inside them, cool, calculating, emotionally impenetrable. The staff called him many things behind his back: the Machine, Mr. Freeze, or simply Ice King. He'd earned the reputation through 5 years of building Meridian into the Pacific Northwest's premier design firm, never losing his temper, never showing weakness, never letting personal feelings cloud professional judgment. Julie watched him stride past her desk toward the executive wing, noting the way conversations died and productivity suddenly spiked in his wake. She'd worked here for 3 years and could count on one hand the number of times Anthony had spoken directly to her. Their interactions were professional, brief, and always left her feeling like she was being politely dismissed. Not that she minded. Julie preferred the background anyway, observing, organizing, keeping the wheels turning while others took the spotlight. Her computer chimed with a meeting reminder, 10 a.m. department head review. Julie gathered her files, ensuring every document was perfectly aligned, every agenda item prioritized. Attention to detail wasn't just her job, it was her superpower. The conference room filled with Meridian's creative leaders, department heads, senior designers, project managers. Julie took her usual seat near the door, notepad ready, invisible as always. Anthony entered precisely at 10, his presence immediately shifting the room's energy. He didn't need to call for attention. Silence fell naturally. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of being listened to. "Let's begin with the Morrison project updates." For the next hour, Julie watched Anthony orchestrate the meeting with surgical precision. He asked pointed questions, made decisive calls, and somehow managed to push everyone toward excellence without raising his voice or showing the slightest crack in his professional facade. But Julie noticed something others missed, the way Anthony's jaw tightened when discussing budget constraints, how his fingers drummed silently against his thigh when frustrated, the almost imperceptible softening around his eyes when praising good work. She'd become a student of these micro-expressions, these tiny windows into the man behind the mask. After the meeting, as department heads filed out discussing lunch plans and weekend adventures, Julie remained behind to collect the scattered papers and straighten chairs. It was a small ritual that brought her satisfaction, returning order to chaos. "Ms. Andres." Julie looked up to find Anthony standing in the doorway, his grey eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Yes, Mr. Bassett? The quarterly reports you compiled last week. They were thorough." Coming from Anthony, thorough was high praise. Julie felt a flutter of pride. "Thank you, sir. I wanted to ensure all departments had the data they needed." He nodded, studying her for a moment longer than necessary. Julie found herself caught in his gaze, noticing for the first time the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his stern expression couldn't quite hide the exhaustion behind his eyes. "Have a good afternoon, Ms. Andres." "You too, Mr. Bassett." He turned to leave, then paused. "Julie." Her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Yes? Good work." After he left, Julie stood alone in the conference room, her heart beating faster than it should have been. 2 words. He'd said 2 simple words, and somehow they felt like so much more. She shook her head, laughing at herself. "Get it together, girl. He's your boss. He's out of your league. And according to office legend, he doesn't even have a heart to break." But as she gathered the last of the papers, Julie couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Anthony Bassett's frozen exterior, something was waiting to thaw, something that might change everything. The problem with careful people is that they notice everything, especially the things they're supposed to ignore. 3 days had passed since Anthony's unexpected compliment, and Julie found herself replaying those 2 words, "good work," at the most inconvenient moments, while stirring her morning coffee, organizing client files, even during her nightly phone call with her mother back in Portland. "You sound different, baby," her mom had said the night before, her warm voice carrying that maternal intuition that could detect emotional shifts across state lines. Something good happening up there in the big city. Julie had laughed it off, claiming it was just the Seattle rain affecting her mood, but the truth was more complicated. Something had shifted that day in the conference room, something she couldn't quite name. Now, standing in Meridian's break room at 7:30 a.m., Julie watched the ancient coffee machine struggle to produce something resembling caffeine. The morning ritual had become her meditation, 15 minutes before the chaos began, when the office belonged to the early birds and ambitious dreamers. "That machine's been threatening to die since I started here." Julie spun around, nearly dropping her mug. Anthony stood in the doorway, looking impossibly put together despite the early hour. Today's armor was a navy suit with subtle pinstripes, a crisp white shirt, and a silver tie that caught the fluorescent light. "Mr. Bassett," she managed, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "You're here early." "I'm always here early." He stepped into the small break room, somehow making the space feel even smaller. "The question is why you're here at 7:30 when your day doesn't officially start until 9. Julie gestured toward the protesting coffee machine. "Quality caffeine requires patience and sacrifice." Something flickered in Anthony's eyes. Amusement, maybe? It was gone before she could be sure. "May I?" He nodded toward the machine. "Of course." Julie stepped aside, acutely aware of the inches between them as he moved past. He smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Soap, maybe, or the faint scent of the rain that perpetually blessed Seattle. Anthony studied the machine with the same intensity he brought to quarterly projections. "Italian design," he murmured, running his fingers along the chrome surface. "Beautiful but temperamental." "Sounds familiar," Julie said before she could stop herself. Anthony's hands stilled. Slowly he turned to face her, one eyebrow raised in question. Heat rushed to Julie's cheeks. "I meant the machine. It's beautiful but temperamental, that's all." "Of course." But there was something in his voice, a subtle warmth that hadn't been there moments before. "Though I suppose beautiful things often are complex." He pressed a sequence of buttons Julie had never noticed, and the machine hummed to life with surprising cooperation. Rich, dark coffee began flowing into his cup, filling the air with an aroma that put the break room's usual bitter brew to shame. "How did you—" "I studied in Milan for a semester," Anthony explained, his attention focused on the brewing process. "Architecture, but I spent more time in cafes than classrooms. You learn to coax the best from any machine if you're patient enough." Julie found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the concentration etched between his brows, the way his usually stern mouth softened when he wasn't actively managing his expression. This wasn't the Ice King the office whispered about. This was just a man who understood coffee machines and missed Italian cafes. Your turn. He stepped back, gesturing toward the now compliant machine. I don't know the magic sequence, Julie admitted. It's not magic, just understanding. Anthony moved closer, his voice dropping to that lower register that made her pulse quicken. See this button? It's mislabeled. Press it first, then wait for the blue light. His hand covered hers as he guided her fingers to the correct sequence. The contact lasted only seconds, but Julie felt it like an electric current running up her arm. There, he said softly. Now you know the secret. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the careful distance between boss and employee dissolved. Julie saw something in Anthony's gaze she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. As if he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. The moment shattered when Trevor burst through the break room door, already talking before he registered the scene. Julie, thank God you're here. The Bellingham client is having a meltdown about the color palette and... Trevor stopped mid-sentence, noticing Anthony. His eyes widened like he'd stumbled into a private meeting between world leaders. Mr. Bassett, sir, I didn't realize you were... I can come back. No need, Anthony said, his professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Ms. Andres, thank you for the coffee consultation. He moved toward the door, pausing only when Trevor stepped aside with exaggerated deference. Oh, and Trevor. Anthony's voice carried its usual authority. The Bellingham client hired us for our expertise, not their approval. Trust the design. After Anthony left, Trevor turned to Julie with obvious bewilderment. What just happened? Was the Ice King actually nice? Julie busied herself with adding cream to her coffee, avoiding Trevor's curious gaze. He was just explaining the coffee machine. That wasn't explaining. That was... Trevor searched for the right word. Intimate. In a weird, corporate way. Don't be ridiculous. Julie. Trevor's voice turned serious. Be careful. Anthony Bassett doesn't do personal connections. Trust me, I've been here 5 years, and I've seen what happens to people who mistake his professional attention for something more. What do you mean? Ask Jennifer from accounting, or Michael from design. Both thought they had moments with the boss. Both found out the hard way that the Ice King doesn't melt. He just knows how to make you think he might. Julie's stomach twisted. Was that what had just happened? Had she misread a simple professional interaction as something meaningful? But as she replayed the scene, Anthony's gentle guidance, the way he'd looked at her, the almost smile that had softened his stern features, Julie couldn't shake the feeling that Trevor was wrong. At least she hoped he was. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of client calls and project coordination, but Julie found herself stealing glances toward the executive wing. Once she caught Anthony looking in her direction through his office's glass walls. When their eyes met, he didn't look away immediately. Instead, he lifted his coffee cup in a small salute before returning to his work. Trevor's warnings echoed in her mind, but her heart whispered something different, something dangerous. Maybe the Ice King wasn't as frozen as everyone believed. Sometimes the most dangerous conversations happen when the office is empty and defenses are down. The rain hammered against the windows of Meridian Design Studios as Julie saved the last of her files, the rhythmic drumming providing a soundtrack to another 12-hour day. At 8:47 p.m., the office had transformed from its usual bustling energy into something quieter, more intimate. Desk lamps created pools of warm light in the gathering darkness, and the city's neon reflections painted abstract art across the polished floors. Julie stretched, feeling the familiar ache between her shoulder blades that came from hunching over spreadsheets since dawn. The Morrison project was consuming her life. Client revisions, budget adjustments, and timeline modifications that seemed to multiply like Seattle's infamous coffee shops. She was reaching for her purse when a soft knock on her cubicle wall made her jump. Working late again. Anthony stood there, his usual armor slightly loosened, suit jacket draped over his arm, tie unknotted, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The sight of him looking almost human sent that familiar flutter through Julie's chest. Mr. Bassett. She quickly straightened, smoothing her blouse. I thought you'd left hours ago. I did. Had dinner with the Peterson Group investors. He moved closer, studying the chaos of documents scattered across her desk. But I saw your light on from the parking garage. Everything all right with Morrison? Julie hesitated. The truth was, she'd been here until nearly 9 for the past week, fixing problems that weren't technically her responsibility, but somehow always ended up on her desk anyway. The design team was brilliant but scattered. The project managers were overloaded, and someone had to ensure the pieces fit together. "Just some coordination issues," she said carefully. "Nothing I can't handle." Anthony's eyes narrowed slightly, the same look he got when reviewing financial projections that didn't add up. "Show me." "Sir? The coordination issues. Show me what's keeping you here until 9 on a Thursday night." Julie glanced around the empty office, suddenly aware they were alone except for the distant hum of the cleaning crew on the lower floors. "It's really not necessary." Julie, her name again, spoken in that softer tone that made her defenses crumble. "Show me." Something in his voice, not commanding but genuinely concerned, made her gesture toward the documents. "The timeline doesn't match the budget projections. The design team wants another 2 weeks for revisions, but the client expects delivery next Friday. Meanwhile, the contractor is threatening to walk if we change the specifications again." Anthony moved around her desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with something distinctly masculine. He studied the papers with the same intensity she'd witnessed in morning meetings, but now that focus was directed at her work, her problems. "You've been managing this alone?" "It's my job." "No." His voice carried an edge of frustration, but not directed at her. "Your job is administrative coordination, not project management miracles. Where's Davidson? This should be his headache." Julie bit her lip. Davidson had been mysteriously unavailable all week, leaving cryptic voicemails about personal emergencies, while Julie quietly held his projects together. "He's been busy." Anthony's jaw tightened. "Busy. Right." He was quiet for a moment, studying the timeline spreadsheet with mathematical precision. "Here." He leaned over her, reaching for a pen, and Julie found herself trapped between his body and her chair. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, could count the subtle grey threads in his dark hair, could see the faint lines around his eyes that spoke of long days and longer nights building his empire. "If we move the design review to Tuesday," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he made notes, "and split the contractor specifications into 2 phases. Julie tried to focus on his words, but her attention kept drifting to the way his fingers moved across the paper, precise and confident. The same hands that had guided hers at the coffee machine, now solving problems that had kept her awake for 3 nights. "That could work," she managed, proud that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Anthony straightened but didn't step away. Their eyes met, and Julie saw something flicker in his gaze, awareness maybe of their proximity, of the way the empty office seemed to pulse with possibility. "You shouldn't have to carry this alone," he said quietly. "I don't mind. I like solving puzzles." "Even when they're not your puzzles to solve?" Julie found herself caught in his gaze, seeing past the professional mask to something deeper, especially then. A smile tugged at the corner of Anthony's mouth, not his polite boardroom smile, but something real and unguarded. "Why?" "Because," Julie hesitated, then decided honesty was the only way forward. "Because when everything works perfectly, when all the pieces fit together, there's this moment where chaos becomes harmony. It's beautiful." Anthony was quiet for so long that Julie wondered if she'd said too much, revealed too much of herself, to a man who collected information like some people collected art. "You see beauty in spreadsheets and timelines," he said finally. "You see possibility in broken coffee machines and architectural disasters." "Touché." Anthony's smile widened, transforming his entire face. "Though I prefer to think of them as optimization opportunities." Julie laughed, a real delighted sound that echoed through the empty office. "That's the most CEO thing you've ever said." "I am a CEO. You're also the man who spent 20 minutes teaching me about Italian coffee culture this morning." "That wasn't teaching, that was—" Anthony paused as if searching for the right words. "That was sharing something that mattered to me." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to address directly. Julie felt her heart speed up, felt the careful professional distance they'd maintained beginning to crack. "Why?" she asked softly. Anthony's eyes never left hers. "Because you listened, like it mattered to you too." The moment stretched, filled with possibility and danger in equal measure. Julie was acutely aware of how easy it would be to take a step forward, to close the distance between them, to find out if the connection she felt was real or just wishful thinking. Instead, Anthony stepped back, the spell breaking as reality reasserted itself. "It's late," he said, his voice returning to its professional register. "You should get home." "Right, of course." Julie began gathering her things, embarrassed by how much his withdrawal stung. "Thank you for the help with Morrison." Julie. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Next time you're drowning in coordination issues, come to me. Don't wait until you're here past 9. I don't want to bother. You're not a bother. The words came out firmer than he'd probably intended. You're valuable to this company. Your perspective matters. Julie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she headed toward the elevator, she could feel Anthony's eyes following her, could sense the weight of all the things neither of them had said. But sometimes the most important conversations happen in silence. He didn't plan it. But the best moments rarely follow a blueprint. Friday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, transforming Seattle from its usual grey palette into something almost optimistic. Julie stood at her apartment window, sipping coffee from her favorite mug, a ceramic piece her sister had made in college, slightly lopsided but perfect in its imperfection. Her phone buzzed with a text from Simone. Date tonight. Please tell me you're not spending Friday night reorganizing your closet again. Julie smiled, typing back. My closet is perfectly organized, thank you very much. That's exactly my point. You're 27, not 72. Live. Before Julie could respond, another message appeared. Also, Mom wants to know if you're bringing anyone to Cousin Maya's wedding next month. Julie's stomach clenched. The wedding. She'd successfully avoided thinking about it for weeks, but the inevitable family interrogation was approaching. At 27, she was officially the last single cousin in a family that treated marriage like a competitive sport. Tell Mom I'm bringing my career. She'll disown you. Worth the risk. An hour later, Julie was at her desk reviewing vendor contracts when her email chimed with a message from Anthony Bassett. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. Subject: Morrison Project, Client Meeting. Ms. Andres, the Morrison Group has requested a face-to-face review of the final concepts. I'd like you to attend as project coordinator to address any timeline concerns. Meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. at their Bellevue offices. Please prepare a comprehensive status report. A. Bassett. Julie read the message twice, her heart racing. Client meetings were typically reserved for senior staff and department heads. For Anthony to include her meant either he trusted her judgment or he needed her expertise on the coordination issues they'd discussed the night before. Maybe both. She spent the next 3 hours crafting the most detailed status report of her career, cross-referencing timelines, budgets, and delivery schedules until every detail was bulletproof. When Anthony's assistant called to say he'd pick her up at 1:30, Julie felt a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with the presentation. At exactly 1:30, Anthony appeared at her desk wearing a charcoal suit that should have been illegal in 12 states. His silver tie caught the afternoon light, and Julie noticed he'd chosen cufflinks instead of buttons, small details that spoke of extra care in his appearance. Ready? He asked, and Julie caught something in his voice. Anticipation, maybe, or nervousness disguised as confidence. Absolutely. The drive to Bellevue gave Julie her first glimpse of Anthony outside the office environment. He drove a sleek BMW with the same precision he brought to everything else, but she noticed the jazz playing softly on the stereo, the coffee cup in the holder that suggested he was human enough to need afternoon caffeine. Tell me about the Morrison Group, Anthony said as they merged onto I-90. Your impression of them as people, not just clients. Julie considered the question, appreciating that he'd asked for her perspective rather than just data. They're perfectionists who don't actually know what perfection looks like. Every revision request is them trying to capture a feeling they can't articulate. Anthony glanced at her, eyebrows raised. That's unusually insightful for an administrative assessment. I listen to the subtext in their emails. When someone says minor adjustments, they usually mean, I hate this, but don't know how to fix it. And you think you know how to fix it? Julie felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't. Anthony's voice was firm. I asked for your opinion because I value it. What would you tell them if you were running this meeting? The question hung between them as they drove through the afternoon traffic. Julie realized this was a test, but not the kind designed to catch her failing. Anthony genuinely wanted to know what she thought. I'd tell them that great design isn't about perfection, she said slowly. It's about creating something that feels inevitable, like it couldn't exist any other way. Anthony was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. That's exactly what I was going to tell them. The Morrison Group offices occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Lake Washington. Julie had researched the company thoroughly, a family business built on luxury residential developments, known for attention to detail and client satisfaction that bordered on obsession. Richard Morrison met them in the lobby, a silver-haired man in his 50s, who radiated the confidence of someone who'd built his fortune by trusting his instincts. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine, but Julie noticed the way his eyes assessed both her and Anthony with shrewd calculation. "Mr. Bassett, a pleasure as always. And you must be Ms. Andres, Rick Morrison." "Mr. Morrison, thank you for including me. Anthony speaks very highly of your work, says you're the reason his projects actually get delivered on time." Julie felt Anthony's eyes on her as heat climbed her neck. "I just help coordinate the details." "Details matter," Morrison said with approval. "Shall we?" The conference room overlooked the lake, afternoon sunshine turning the water into liquid gold. Morrison's team was smaller than Julie had expected. Just Morrison, his daughter Elena, who handled design liaisons, and their construction manager, Tom Bradley. Anthony began the presentation with his usual confidence, walking them through the final design concepts with the kind of quiet authority that made people want to say yes. But Julie watched the clients' faces, reading the micro-expressions that revealed their true reactions. Elena Morrison was nodding, but her fingers drummed against her notepad, a sign of nervous energy. Tom Bradley kept glancing at his phone, suggesting timeline concerns. And Richard Morrison himself was doing that thing Julie had learned to recognize in difficult clients, smiling while calculating how to ask for the impossible. When Anthony finished, the room fell silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning. "It's beautiful work," Morrison said finally. "Truly exceptional." But there it was, the but that Julie had been expecting since they'd walked in. "But I'm concerned about the timeline," Morrison continued. "We need to break ground before the weather turns, which gives us less than 8 weeks. Can Meridian deliver?" Anthony's expression didn't change, but Julie caught the slight tension in his shoulders. This was the coordination nightmare she'd been wrestling with all week, the impossible timeline that looked feasible on paper but required perfect execution in reality. "Absolutely," Anthony said with characteristic confidence. "We've built buffer time into each phase." Elena Morrison leaned forward. "What about the material delays we've been hearing about? The steel shortages, shipping issues from overseas suppliers?" Julie felt the moment shifting, saw Anthony calculating responses while the client's concerns multiplied. This was where projects died, not from bad design but from logistics that couldn't adapt to reality. Without conscious thought, Julie found herself speaking. "May I address that?" The room turned toward her, and Julie felt the weight of 5 pairs of eyes. Anthony's expression was unreadable, but he nodded almost imperceptibly. "The material delays are real," Julie said, standing and moving to the presentation screen. "But they're also predictable. We've identified 3 critical path items that could derail the timeline." She pulled out her tablet, displaying the coordination matrices she'd built over sleepless nights. "First, steel delivery. We've already secured our primary order with a backup supplier confirmed. Second, the specialty glass for the main facade, ordered yesterday with priority shipping. Third, the Italian stonework for the lobby." "That's been our biggest concern," Tom Bradley interrupted. "The quarry said 12 weeks minimum." Julie smiled. "Unless you have the right connections." "Mr. Bassett studied architecture in Milan. He still has relationships with suppliers who can expedite orders for the right project." She glanced at Anthony, whose eyes had widened slightly at her unexpected revelation of his expertise. "The stone can be here in 6 weeks if we place the order by Monday," Julie continued. "Everything else is already in motion." Richard Morrison was leaning forward now, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine interest. "You've already coordinated all this?" "It's what I do," Julie said simply. "I see the pieces that have to fit together and make sure they do." "Impressive." Morrison looked between Julie and Anthony with new appreciation. "Very impressive." The meeting concluded 30 minutes later, with signed contracts and a timeline that would challenge everyone but was actually achievable. As they walked back to the parking garage, Anthony was unusually quiet. "That was—" he began, then stopped. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," Julie said quickly. "I know you had everything under control." "Julie." Anthony stopped walking, turning to face her in the concrete shadows of the parking garage. "That was brilliant. You just saved $1 million project." The praise hit her like a physical force, warming her from the inside out. "I just connected some dots." "You connected dots I didn't even see. The Milan suppliers, the backup materials, the way you read their concerns." Anthony shook his head. "Where did you learn to do that?" "I don't know. I just pay attention." Anthony studied her face in the dim garage lighting, and Julie felt something shift between them. The professional distance that had defined their relationship was dissolving, replaced by something more dangerous and infinitely more appealing. "Have dinner with me," Anthony said suddenly. Julie's heart stopped. "Sir? Dinner, tonight, to celebrate the Morrison contract." His voice carried a note of uncertainty she'd never heard before. "Unless you have other plans." Julie thought of her sister's text, of Friday night stretching ahead with nothing but Netflix and leftover takeout, of the careful walls she'd built around her heart, and the way Anthony seemed determined to find every crack in her defenses. "I don't have other plans," she heard herself say. Anthony's smile was different this time, not his polite professional expression, but something genuine and unguarded that transformed his entire face. "Perfect. I know just the place. Some dinners change everything. Others reveal that everything already changed, you just hadn't noticed." Julie stood in front of her closet at 6:15 p.m., surrounded by discarded outfit options that transformed her usually pristine bedroom into what looked like a fashion tornado had swept through. 3 dresses lay across her bed, 2 blazers hung over her chair, and she was currently staring at herself in a navy-wrapped dress that was either perfect or completely wrong. Her phone rang, displaying Simone's name. "Please tell me you're not cancelling on some poor guy because you can't find the perfect outfit," Simone said without preamble. "I'm not cancelling, I'm calibrating." "Calibrating? Girl, it's dinner, not a space mission. Who is he?" Julie hesitated. "How did you explain that you were having dinner with your boss? The same boss everyone called the Ice King? The man who made grown department heads nervous with a single glance?" "It's complicated." "Complicated how? Married? Emotionally unavailable, secret criminal mastermind?" "He's my boss." Silence, then. "Holy shit, Julie. Language." "Don't language me. You're going on a date with your boss? The same boss you've been secretly crushing on for 3 years?" "It's not a date. It's a celebration dinner. For landing a big client." "Uh-huh. And I suppose he invited the entire team to this celebration dinner." Julie bit her lip. "Just me. Julie Marie Andres. This is a date. A real, actual date with a man you've been staring at like he hung the moon every time you think no one's looking." "I don't stare. Honey, you stare. Trust me. I've seen you stare. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Julie sank onto her bed, careful not to wrinkle the dress options. "I don't know. This is Anthony Bassett we're talking about. He's sophisticated, successful, probably dates supermodels and socialites. I'm just what? Beautiful, brilliant, funny, kind. The woman who single-handedly keeps his company running while he gets all the credit." "Simone, no. Listen to me. Any man would be lucky to have dinner with you. Boss or not, Ice King or not. You're incredible. And if he's smart enough to notice, then maybe he's worthy of my sister after all." Julie felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I mess this up?" "Then you mess it up. But don't you dare not try because you're scared. You've been playing it safe your whole life, Julie. Maybe it's time to take a risk." After Simone hung up, Julie stood in front of her mirror, really looking at herself. The navy wrap dress accentuated her curves without being too revealing. The color complemented her skin tone perfectly, and her natural hair was styled in loose curls that framed her face beautifully. She looked professional enough for a business dinner, feminine enough for a date. Perfect for whatever this evening turned out to be. Anthony had chosen Il Bistro, a small Italian restaurant tucked into Pike Place Market that Julie had walked past hundreds of times but never entered. From the outside, it looked unassuming, just another doorway in the tourist maze of the market. But inside, candlelight flickered off exposed brick walls, and the scent of garlic and fresh herbs made her mouth water instantly. "Mr. Bassett," the maitre d' greeted Anthony like an old friend. "Your usual table. Please, Marco. And this is Ms. Andres." Marco's weathered face broke into a genuine smile as he kissed Julie's hand in the old-fashioned way. "Bella Signorina, welcome to Il Bistro." Their table was tucked into a corner alcove, intimate without being obvious about it. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and through the window, Julie could see the market winding down for the evening. Vendors closing stalls, tourists heading home with bags of flowers and fresh bread. "This place is beautiful," Julie said, settling into her chair. "How did you find it?" Anthony poured wine from a bottle that had appeared without being ordered. "Marco and his family have been here for 30 years. When I was starting Meridian, I used to come here when I needed to think. Marco would let me sit for hours over a single cup of coffee while I worked through problems. And now? Now he keeps a bottle of Chianti with my name on it, and pretends not to notice when I need to escape the corporate fishbowl. Julie took a sip of the wine, surprised by its warmth and complexity. You come here to escape. Anthony was quiet for a moment, studying the wine in his glass. Sometimes the weight of being Anthony Bassett CEO gets heavy. Here, I'm just another customer who appreciates good food and honest conversation. The admission surprised her. Anthony had always seemed so comfortable with his authority, so naturally suited to leadership, that she'd never considered the burden it might carry. "Is that why you studied architecture instead of business?" she asked. "You've been researching me." Heat climbed Julie's neck. "I mentioned Milan earlier in the meeting. I realized I'd never actually asked about your background." Anthony smiled, not his polite professional expression, but something warmer. Architecture was about creating beauty from nothing, taking empty spaces and imagining what they could become. Business, he paused, considering. Business is about maintaining what already exists. But you created Meridian from nothing. I created a company. The beauty comes from people like you who see connections I miss and solve problems I didn't know existed. Marco appeared with plates of antipasti, olives, cured meats, cheese that smelled like heaven. "For the signorina," he said, placing a small dish in front of Julie. "Fresh mozzarella made this morning by my wife." After Marco left, Anthony leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something about yourself that's not in your personnel file." Julie nearly choked on her wine. "My personnel file? Age, education, employment history? But I don't know anything about Julie Andres the person. What you do when you're not coordinating my chaos?" The question was more intimate than anything that had passed between them before. Julie felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. "I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends," she said finally. "Walking dogs, mostly. There's something peaceful about it, just being present with creatures who don't care about deadlines or profit margins." "What else?" "I paint. Watercolors. Nothing fancy. Usually landscapes or city scenes. I like trying to capture the way light changes throughout the day." Anthony's eyes brightened with interest. "Do you have a favorite subject?" "Seattle in the rain. I know it sounds cliché, but there's something beautiful about the way the city looks when it's washed clean. All soft edges and reflected light. It's not cliché, it's observation, seeing beauty where others see inconvenience." "What about you?" Julie asked, emboldened by his genuine interest. "What does Anthony Bassett do when he's not being a CEO?" "Lately, I work. And when I'm not working, I think about work." Anthony's smile was self-deprecating. "I know how that sounds. Lonely." The word slipped out before Julie could stop it, hanging between them like a confession neither had intended to make. Anthony's expression grew serious. "Yes, it is." Marco returned with their main courses, ossobuco for Anthony, seafood risotto for Julie that looked like a work of art. But Julie barely noticed the food, caught up in the shift that had occurred in their conversation. "Why did you invite me tonight?" she asked softly. Anthony was quiet for a long moment, cutting his meat with surgical precision. "Because watching you in that meeting today, seeing you command the room with such quiet confidence, I realized I've been missing something important, which is you." Anthony met her eyes directly. "I've been so focused on maintaining professional distance that I failed to see the remarkable woman right in front of me." Julie's heart hammered against her ribs. "Anthony, I know this complicates things. I know there are professional boundaries, company policies, a dozen reasons why this is probably a terrible idea." Anthony set down his fork, giving her his complete attention. "But I also know that life is short, and opportunities for genuine connection are rare. I'd rather navigate complications than live with regret." The restaurant seemed to fade around them, reduced to candlelight and possibility. Julie felt like she was balanced on that cliff edge again, but this time, the jump didn't seem so terrifying. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between coffee machines and client meetings, you've become the most interesting part of my day. I'm saying that I'd like to find out what happens when we stop pretending this is purely professional." Julie reached for her wine, needing a moment to process the magnitude of what Anthony was offering. "And if it doesn't work? If we try this and it falls apart? Then we'll handle it like adults." "But Julie," Anthony's voice dropped to that intimate register that made her pulse race. "What if it does work?" Outside the window, Seattle sparkled in the early evening darkness, the market settling into its nighttime rhythm. Inside Il Bistro, two people sat across from each other, finally acknowledging what had been building between them for months. Julie took a breath, feeling like she was about to change her life forever. "Then I guess we find out together." Monday morning after crossing a line feels different. Everything looks the same, but the air itself has changed. Julie woke up Monday morning with the kind of smile that hurt her cheeks and a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with coffee. She'd replayed Friday night's dinner approximately 17 times over the weekend, analyzing every word, every glance, every moment when Anthony's careful composure had slipped to reveal something deeper. The way he'd walked her to her car, his hand settling naturally on the small of her back. How he'd hesitated before saying goodnight, as if weighing words he wasn't quite ready to speak. The text he'd sent Saturday morning. Thank you for a perfect evening. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. Even Anthony's flirtation sounded like a business proposal, which Julie found ridiculously charming. She dressed with extra care, a burgundy blouse that brought out the warmth in her skin, her best-fitting black slacks, the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for college graduation. Professional enough for the office, but with subtle touches that said she'd made an effort. For him. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it felt like waking up after a long sleep. Meridian Design Studios buzzed with typical Monday energy as Julie stepped off the elevator. She waved to Trevor, who was already deep in a design crisis, judging by the scattered sketches covering his desk, and smiled at Rebecca from accounting, who was juggling 3 coffee cups and a stack of invoices with impressive dexterity. Everything looked exactly the same as it had Friday afternoon. Same open-plan workspace, same floor-to-ceiling windows framing Seattle's morning clouds, same hum of creative minds solving beautiful problems. But Julie felt like she was seeing it through new eyes, sharper, more vivid, as if someone had adjusted the color saturation of her world. You're glowing. Julie spun to find Lauren Chen from the design team studying her with the analytical eye of someone trained to notice details. I'm sorry? Glowing. Like, literally, glowing. New skincare routine or... Lauren's eyes narrowed with sudden interest. Wait, you had a date this weekend. Heat climbed Julie's neck. I had dinner with a friend. Uh-huh. Must have been some friend. You look like someone who got thoroughly kissed. Lauren! Julie glanced around the office, panic fluttering in her chest. Relax. Your secret's safe. But honey, whatever happened this weekend, it looks good on you. Lauren grinned and headed toward the design pit, calling over her shoulder, just remember to invite me to the wedding. Julie sank into her chair, heart racing. If Lauren could read the change in her face that easily, what would happen when Anthony arrived? Would their new understanding be visible to everyone, like a neon sign announcing that something had shifted between them? She tried to focus on emails, but every sound from the elevator made her pulse jump. At 8:47, exactly when he always arrived, the familiar chime announced his presence. Anthony stepped onto the floor wearing a navy suit that should have been registered as a weapon, his hair perfectly styled, his expression carrying its usual morning calm. He moved through the office with characteristic confidence, nodding to employees, projecting the same controlled authority he'd maintained for 5 years. But when his eyes found Julie's across the open workspace, everything changed. The professional mask slipped for just a heartbeat, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth, not his polite CEO expression, but the real smile she'd seen Friday night over candlelight and Italian wine. Then the moment passed, and Anthony Bassett, CEO, continued toward his office. But Julie felt the impact of that look like a physical touch, warming her from the inside out. Her computer chimed with an instant message. A. Bassett, good morning. Coffee in 10 minutes. Julie's heart hammered as she typed back, the machine still needs your Italian expertise. A. Bassett. Among other things. The response made her cheeks burn. Anthony Bassett was flirting with her, via company instant messenger. During business hours, she was absolutely doomed. The break room was empty when Julie arrived, the morning coffee rush having died down to its usual trickle of desperate stragglers. She was studying the Italian machine, trying to remember Anthony's sequence of buttons, when warm hands settled on her shoulders. May I? Anthony's voice was close to her ear, his breath warm against her neck. Julie's knees went weak as he moved closer, not quite touching, but close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the heat radiating from his body. I still don't know the magic combination, she admitted, proud that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. It's not magic. Anthony's hands covered hers, guiding her fingers to the correct sequence just as he had 5 days ago. But this time, the contact lingered. This time, when Julie leaned back slightly, She felt the solid warmth of his chest against her shoulders. Anthony. His name came out breathier than she'd intended. He was still holding her hands, his thumbs tracing small circles over her knuckles. Someone could walk in. They could, but he didn't step away. Instead, he turned her gently until she was facing him, trapped between his body and the coffee counter. "Are you worried about office gossip?" Julie studied his face, noting the way morning light highlighted the grey flecks in his eyes, the small scar above his eyebrow that she was beginning to find endearing, the careful way he was watching her reaction. "I'm worried about you," she said honestly. "Your reputation, your company. What happens to Anthony Bassett, CEO, if people find out he's interested in his administrative coordinator?" Something flickered in Anthony's expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation for her concern. What happens to Julie Andres if people find out her boss is completely captivated by her? The word captivated hit her like a small earthquake. Julie felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling, replaced by something brave and reckless that she barely recognized. "I guess we find out together," she said, echoing her words from Friday night. Anthony's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his entire face. "I was hoping you'd say that." He was leaning closer, and Julie realized with a mixture of terror and anticipation that Anthony Bassett was about to kiss her in the company break room. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her lips parted slightly in invitation. "Oh, sorry!" They sprang apart as Trevor burst through the door, already talking before he registered the scene. "Julie, thank God you're here. The Bellingham client is having another meltdown about the color palette, and I need you to work your magic with their timeline anxiety, and—" Trevor stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he took in Julie's flushed cheeks and Anthony's carefully neutral expression. "Mr. Bassett, sir. I didn't see you there. I mean, I see you now, obviously, but I didn't see you when I came in because I was focused on the client crisis. Not that there's anything to see because you're just getting coffee. Both of you, together, getting coffee." Trevor was babbling, which meant he definitely noticed something was happening but wasn't quite sure what. "The Bellingham client," Anthony said smoothly, as if intimate moments in break rooms were standard CEO protocol. "What specific concerns do they have?" Julie marveled at Anthony's ability to shift seamlessly back into professional mode while her heart was still racing from their near kiss. "Color temperature in the main lobby," Trevor said, clearly grateful for the subject change. "They want warmer tones, but that throws off the entire palette we've developed. Schedule a call for this afternoon," Anthony instructed. "Julie, can you coordinate with their design team to review alternatives?" "Of course," Julie managed, impressed that her voice sounded normal. Anthony nodded to both of them and headed toward the door, pausing only when Trevor was distracted by his phone buzzing. "Julie," Anthony's voice was low, meant only for her. "Dinner tonight? To continue our conversation about client management strategies." The innocent words carried layers of promise that made Julie's pulse spike. "I'd like that." 7 o'clock, I'll text you the address." After Anthony left, Trevor turned to Julie with obvious curiosity. Was it just me, or was that weirdly intense? Julie busied herself with finally getting the coffee machine to cooperate. "You're imagining things." "Julie, I've worked here for 5 years. I've never seen the Ice King look at anyone the way he was looking at you." "How was he looking at me?" Trevor grinned. "Like a man who's discovered something he didn't know he was missing." Julie felt her cheeks burn again, but this time she couldn't bring herself to deny it. Because Trevor was right. Something fundamental had shifted between her and Anthony. Something that couldn't be undone or ignored or explained away as professional courtesy. Something that was about to change everything. The second date is when you stop pretending and start being honest about what you want. Anthony had chosen something completely unexpected for their second evening together. The Seattle Art Museum's after-hours event, where local artists displayed works alongside wine and jazz music that drifted through galleries like whispered secrets. Julie stood before a watercolor landscape that reminded her of her own attempts at capturing Seattle's moody beauty, acutely aware of Anthony beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You're frowning," he observed quietly. "I'm thinking." "About?" Julie gestured toward the painting, a storm rolling over Elliott Bay, all grey clouds and silver water. "The artist captured something I've been trying to paint for months. That moment right before the rain hits when the air feels electric and anything seems possible." Anthony studied the piece with the same intensity he brought to architectural blueprints. "What's been stopping you?" "Fear, probably, of not getting it right. Of trying to capture something too big for my skill level. Or, Anthony said, turning to face her fully, fear of capturing it perfectly and having to admit you're more talented than you pretend to be. The observation hit closer to home than Julie had expected. She'd been hiding behind self-deprecation for so long that she'd almost convinced herself it was true. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Bassett? That's my personal observation, Julie. Her name on his lips still sent that familiar shiver down her spine. You have a habit of diminishing your own abilities, in meetings, in conversation, even with your art, as if taking up space is something you need to apologize for. They moved through the gallery slowly, pausing before pieces that caught their attention. Julie found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't expected, the wine and Anthony's quiet presence combining to create something that felt dangerously close to perfect. Tell me about your family, Anthony said as they stopped before a sculpture that seemed to defy gravity. Julie hesitated. Her family was wonderful but complicated, loving, loud, and utterly bewildered by her choice to live quietly in Seattle instead of settling down in Portland with a nice man and 2.5 children. My parents are teachers. Mom handles kindergarten. Dad teaches high school history. They've been married 32 years and still hold hands in public, which is either adorable or embarrassing depending on your perspective. And you have a sister, Simone. She's 24, a ceramic artist, and completely convinced that I'm wasting my life being responsible and practical. Julie smiled, thinking of her sister's reaction to the dinner invitation. She's probably right. Anthony was quiet for a moment, studying the sculpture with apparent fascination. What does she think about you having dinner with your boss? Heat climbed Julie's neck. I may have mentioned you. And she wants to know if you're worthy of her sister. Anthony's laugh was genuine and surprised. What's the verdict? Julie met his eyes, noting the way gallery lighting softened his usually sharp features. The jury's still out. Fair enough. What would convince them? The question was playful, but Julie sensed something deeper underneath, a vulnerability that Anthony rarely let show. Honesty, she said simply. My family values authenticity above everything else. Show up as yourself, not as the CEO or the polished businessman, just Anthony. And who is that exactly? Julie studied his face, seeing past the expensive suit and carefully styled hair to something more essential. I'm still figuring that out, but I like what I've discovered so far. They found themselves in a quieter section of the museum, away from the main crowd. Anthony stopped before a series of black and white photographs, Seattle street scenes from the 1960s, all rain-soaked pavement and dramatic shadows. I bought my first camera after seeing an exhibition like this, he said quietly. Thought I might become a photographer instead of an architect. What changed your mind? Practicality, responsibility, the need to build something stable. Anthony's smile was self-deprecating. All the things your sister thinks you have too much of. Do you ever regret it? Anthony considered the question seriously. I used to think I didn't. Building Meridian gave me purpose, success, everything I thought I wanted. But lately I've been wondering what I might have created if I'd been brave enough to take the risk. Julie felt something shift between them, a deeper honesty that went beyond wine and romantic lighting. It's not too late, you know, to be brave. Anthony turned to face her fully, his grey eyes intense in the dim gallery lighting. Is that what this is? Being brave? Terrifyingly so. Anthony stepped closer, close enough that Julie had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I haven't been terrified in years. It's unsettling. Good terrified or bad terrified, the kind that makes you feel alive. Anthony's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Julie, yes? I'm going to kiss you. Here, in this museum, surrounded by art and possibility, and I don't care who sees. Julie's heart hammered against her ribs. Anthony, if that makes you uncomfortable. No. Julie's hand settled over his wrist, holding his touch against her face. I want you to. Anthony's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his entire expression. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, passionate kiss from a movie. It was something better, gentle and sure, and full of promise. Anthony kissed her like she was precious, like he had all the time in the world to discover the shape of her lips and the sound of her sigh. When they broke apart, Julie felt dizzy and warm and completely changed. That was, she began, long overdue. Julie laughed, the sound echoing softly through the gallery. I was going to say perfect. Even better. They stayed close together, foreheads nearly touching, sharing the same breath in the intimate space they'd created around themselves. Julie felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast and wonderful, and slightly terrifying. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Anthony's hand moved to tangle in her hair, his touch gentle but possessive. "Now we stop pretending this is just professional courtesy, and start admitting it's something else, something much more dangerous." Julie felt her pulse spike at the promise in his voice. "How dangerous?" Anthony's smile was different this time, not his careful CEO expression, but something real and unguarded that made her knees weak, the kind that changes everything. Later, as Anthony walked her to her car in the museum's parking garage, Julie felt the evening's magic settling around them like a warm coat. The kiss had shifted something fundamental between them, crossing a line they couldn't uncross. "Dinner Friday?" Anthony asked as they reached her car. "That's becoming a habit." "I hope so." Anthony's hand settled on her waist, thumb brushing against her hip bone through the fabric of her dress. "Though next time, I'm cooking." Julie's eyebrows rose. "You cook? I have many hidden talents, Ms. Andres." The way he said it, low and intimate, made heat pool in Julie's stomach. "I'm beginning to discover that." Anthony leaned down to kiss her again, softer this time but no less affecting. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. "Friday, 7 o'clock, my place." "That's moving pretty fast, Mr. Bassett." Anthony's smile was pure mischief. "Sometimes the best architecture requires bold structural choices." Julie laughed despite herself. "Did you just compare our relationship to a building project? Would you prefer a different metaphor? How about we skip the metaphors and see what happens?" Anthony's expression grew serious, his hand coming up to cup her face again. "Julie, I need you to know this isn't casual for me. Whatever this is between us, it matters." The admission hit her like a small earthquake. Julie reached up to cover his hand with hers, threading their fingers together. "It matters to me, too." They stood like that for a moment, hands clasped, hearts racing, both aware they were stepping into territory that could change everything. "Drive safe," Anthony said finally. "You too." Julie slipped into her car, but didn't start the engine immediately. Through her windshield, she watched Anthony walk to his BMW, noting the confident set of his shoulders, the way he moved with purpose even in a parking garage. As she drove home through Seattle's quiet streets, Julie caught herself smiling at red lights. Anthony Bassett, the Ice King, the untouchable CEO, had kissed her in a museum and promised to cook her dinner. And for the first time in her carefully planned life, Julie had no idea what came next. The thing about crossing lines is that you can never quite see where the next one is drawn. Anthony's penthouse overlooked Elliott Bay, from the 40th floor of a glass tower that pierced Seattle's skyline like an elegant sword. Julie stood in his living room Friday evening, a glass of wine in her hand, trying not to feel intimidated by the sheer perfection of everything around her. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the bay like a living painting, the water dark and silver under the evening sky. The furniture was understated but clearly expensive, clean lines, neutral colors, everything placed with the same precision Anthony brought to his office. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and completely impersonal, like a very expensive hotel room where no one actually lived. "You're doing it again," Anthony called from the kitchen, where he was doing something that smelled incredible with garlic and white wine. "Doing what?" Frowning, thinking too hard, Julie moved toward the kitchen, following the scent of herbs and butter. "I was just noticing how perfectly organized everything is. Do you actually live here, or is this just where you store your suits?" Anthony looked up from the stove, where he was stirring something in a copper pan that probably cost more than Julie's monthly rent. He'd traded his usual armor for dark jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and the casual look was somehow more devastating than any designer suit. "That obvious, huh? There are no personal photos, no books lying around, no evidence of human habitation beyond very expensive furniture." Anthony's smile was self-deprecating. "I told you I work too much. Home is just where I sleep and change clothes." Julie studied his profile as he cooked, noting the way concentration softened his features. "When did you last take a real vacation?" Define real. More than a weekend. Somewhere that requires a passport. Anthony was quiet for a moment, tasting whatever he was creating. 4 years ago, Milan for a design conference, but I spent most of it in meetings, so I'm not sure that counts. "Anthony," Julie set down her wine and moved closer. "That's not living. That's just existing," says the woman who works 12-hour days without being asked. "That's different." "How?" Julie struggled to articulate the difference. "I work because I love solving puzzles, creating order, You work because... Why do you work so much? Anthony turned off the heat and faced her fully, his expression more serious than she'd expected. Because if I stop moving, I might have to think about what I'm moving toward. And for a long time, I wasn't sure I'd like the answer. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Julie stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. And now I'm starting to think the answer might be standing in my kitchen, asking uncomfortable questions. Heat flooded Julie's cheeks. Anthony, I know, too much, too fast. But Julie, I've spent 5 years building walls around myself, and somehow you've found every crack in my defenses. I don't know how to do this halfway. Before Julie could respond, Anthony's phone rang with the sharp, insistent tone of someone calling after business hours. His face immediately shifted into professional mode as he glanced at the screen. I'm sorry, I have to take this. Morrison Group. Julie waved him toward the living room while she tried to calm her racing heart. Anthony's words echoed in her mind. The answer might be standing in my kitchen. It was a declaration wrapped in uncertainty, romantic and terrifying in equal measure. She could hear Anthony's voice from the other room, clipped and professional as he handled whatever crisis had arisen. Julie wandered back to the windows, watching lights twinkle across the bay, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening between them. Sorry. Anthony returned 10 minutes later, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Client emergency. The Morrison project has hit a snag with city permits. Is it serious? Potentially. We might need to revise the entire structural plan. Anthony moved to the stove, checking on dinner with distracted efficiency. I hate that work followed me here. Tonight was supposed to be about us. Julie studied his face, reading the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders had tightened with stress. This was Anthony in crisis mode, the CEO who carried the weight of other people's problems without complaint. Can I help? Anthony looked surprised. Julie, you're off duty. This is your Friday night, and you're stressed about something I might actually be able to fix. What's the permit issue? For a moment, Anthony seemed to wrestle with himself, the man who handled everything alone, warring with someone who was learning to share the load. Timeline conflicts with the environmental impact study. The city wants a 6-week delay, but Morrison needs to break ground before the weather changes. Julie was already moving toward her purse, pulling out her phone. What if there's a workaround, alternative permits that might apply? Julie, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. Julie was already scrolling through her contacts. I have a friend at the city planning office. Let me make a call. 20 minutes later, Julie had connected Anthony with a permit specialist who might be able to expedite the alternative documentation they needed. The call was scheduled for Monday morning, but the crisis had shifted from disaster to manageable challenge. How did you do that? Anthony asked, his expression mixing gratitude with something deeper. I pay attention to people. Sarah mentioned the alternative permit process at a coffee shop 3 months ago. I remembered because it seemed like the kind of thing that might be useful someday. Anthony was staring at her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. You just saved Morrison. Again, I made a phone call. You made connections I didn't even know existed. Anthony moved closer, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made her pulse race. Do you have any idea how extraordinary you are? Heat climbed Julie's neck. Anthony, no, I'm serious. You see solutions where others see problems. You remember details that matter. Anthony paused, as if searching for the right words. You make me want to be better than I am. The admission hit Julie like a physical force. She reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You're already better than you think. Anthony's hand covered hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. Julie, I need you to know something. What? This isn't just attraction. It's not just chemistry or convenience or... Anthony's voice grew quiet. I'm falling in love with you. The words hit Julie like a small earthquake. She stared at Anthony's face, seeing vulnerability and certainty in equal measure, feeling her careful world reshaping itself around this moment. Anthony, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know where I stand. Julie's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed the magnitude of his confession. Anthony Bassett, the Ice King, the untouchable CEO, had just told her he was falling in love with her in his sterile penthouse kitchen while dinner cooled on the stove. I'm terrified, she whispered. Of me? Of this? Of how much I want it to be real? Anthony's smile was soft and understanding. It is real, Julie. Whatever this is between us, it's the most real thing in my life. Before Julie could respond, Anthony leaned down and kissed her, But this kiss was different from the gentle exploration at the museum. This was deeper, more urgent, filled with weeks of careful restraint finally breaking free. Julie melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as Anthony's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. She could taste wine on his lips, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest, could lose herself completely in the solid warmth of his body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." Julie's pulse spiked at the invitation, at the promise implicit in those simple words. She was standing at another cliff edge, but this time the jump felt inevitable. "Anthony, not for anything you're not ready for. Just stay. Let me wake up tomorrow, knowing this is real." Julie looked into his eyes, seeing past the successful businessman to the man who'd admitted his fears, who'd confessed his feelings, who'd asked her to stay with a vulnerability that broke her heart and rebuilt it simultaneously. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll stay." Sometimes the most dangerous moment isn't when you fall, it's when you realize how far you've fallen. Julie woke up slowly, consciousness returning in layers like morning fog lifting from Elliott Bay, silk sheets that weren't hers, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a view no apartment could afford, the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something distinctly masculine. Anthony. She was in Anthony's bed, wearing one of his white dress shirts that fell to mid-thigh, with no memory of how she'd gotten there beyond wine and confessions and the most perfect night of her life. Anthony lay beside her, still asleep, his dark hair mussed, and his usually sharp features softened by unconsciousness. For a moment, Julie let herself simply watch him. Without the armor of his expensive suits and careful control, Anthony looked younger, more vulnerable. She could see the faint lines around his eyes that spoke of too many late nights, the small scar above his eyebrow that she'd traced with gentle fingers in the darkness. They hadn't made love, not in the traditional sense, but they'd shared something deeper, more intimate, hours of whispered conversations and gentle touches, of barriers dissolving and truths exchanged like gifts. Anthony had held her like she was precious, kissed her like she was the answer to questions he'd forgotten he was asking. Julie's phone buzzed from the nightstand, shattering the peaceful quiet. A text from Simone. "Details. Now. And don't you dare say it was fine." Before Julie could respond, another message appeared. "Also, Mum wants to know if you're bringing your mysterious man to Maya's wedding. I told her probably not, because you're allergic to happiness, but prove me wrong. The wedding." Julie's stomach clenched as reality crashed back into her perfect morning. In just 1 week, she'd be surrounded by her entire extended family, all eager to dissect her love life with the thoroughness of investigative journalists. "How exactly did you introduce your boss as your boyfriend?" "Everyone, meet Anthony. He's my CEO and also the man I'm falling in love with." "No, this couldn't possibly end in disaster." "You're frowning." Julie looked over to find Anthony awake, watching her with those perceptive grey eyes that seemed to see too much. "Good morning," she said, trying to push away her spiraling thoughts. Anthony's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his entire face. "It is a very good morning." He reached over to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I was just—" Julie hesitated, then decided honesty was the only way forward. "My family, they want to know if I'm bringing someone to my cousin's wedding." Anthony's expression grew thoughtful. "And that's a problem because I don't know how to explain us, what we are, what this is." Julie gestured between them, frustrated by her inability to find the right words. Anthony was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "What do you want us to be?" The question was simple, but the answer felt enormous. Julie studied Anthony's face, seeing past the successful businessman to the man who'd held her through the night, who'd whispered his fears and dreams in the darkness. "I want us to be real," she said finally. "Not just secret dinners and stolen moments. I want—" Julie took a breath, gathering courage. "I want to wake up next to you on Saturday mornings and argue about coffee and meet your friends and have you meet mine. I want normal." Anthony's smile widened. "I'd like that too. Though I should warn you, I don't have many friends. Workaholic CEOs aren't exactly social butterflies. Then you'll love my family. They'll adopt you instantly and spend the next decade trying to fix everything they think is wrong with your life." Sounds terrifying. It absolutely is. Anthony leaned over to kiss her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. "When's the wedding?" 1 week. "But Anthony, you don't have to—" "I'd like to meet them, your family, if you want me to." Julie felt something ease in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. You might regret that offer. I doubt it. Anthony's phone rang from the nightstand, the sharp business tone that had interrupted their dinner the night before. He glanced at the screen and sighed. I'm sorry, it's my assistant. Saturday morning calls usually mean emergency, take it. Anthony answered with his usual professional efficiency, but Julie watched his expression change from mild concern to sharp focus to something approaching alarm. When? He asked, his voice taking on the clipped tone she recognized from crisis meetings. How bad? I see. Call an emergency board meeting for Monday morning and get our legal team on standby. Julie sat up straighter, reading the tension in Anthony's shoulders. Whatever was happening, it was serious. Yes, I understand the implications, Anthony continued. No, absolutely no comments to the press until we know more. I'll be in the office within the hour. He hung up and ran a hand through his hair. The gesture she'd learned meant he was processing bad news. What's wrong? Julie asked. Anthony was quiet for a moment, staring at his phone like it might provide better answers. Davidson. He's been arrested. Arrested? Julie's stomach dropped. For what? Embezzlement. The FBI raided his house this morning. Apparently he's been siphoning money from client accounts for the past 18 months. Julie felt the blood drain from her face. Davidson was the project manager who'd been mysteriously unavailable all week, leaving her to coordinate his responsibilities. The same man whose absence had led to those late nights at the office, the connection that had brought her and Anthony closer together. How much money? Preliminary estimates suggest around $2 million. The number hit Julie like a physical blow. $2 million. From Meridian's clients, from companies that trusted Anthony's leadership, his integrity. Anthony? Julie reached for his hand, but he was already moving, shifting into crisis mode. I have to get to the office. The board will want answers, the clients will panic, and we need to get ahead of this before it destroys everything we've built. Julie watched Anthony transform before her eyes, the vulnerable man who'd held her through the night, disappearing behind the armor of CEO Anthony Bassett. He was already mentally 3 steps ahead, calculating damage control and legal strategies. What can I do to help? Anthony paused in his rush toward the closet, turning to look at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Julie, this is going to get ugly. Media attention, FBI investigations, clients questioning everything. Anyone connected to me is going to be scrutinized. Understanding hit her like cold water. You're worried about how this affects us. I'm worried about how this affects you. Anthony's voice was firm. Your reputation, your career. If people find out we're involved, they'll assume you knew about Davidson. They'll question your integrity. Julie felt something cold settle in her stomach. Are you breaking up with me? I'm trying to protect you. That's not what I asked. Anthony was quiet for a long moment, and Julie saw the war happening behind his eyes. The man who cared for her fighting with the CEO who carried responsibility for hundreds of employees and millions in client investments. I don't know, he said finally, his honesty brutal and devastating. I don't know how to protect you and keep you at the same time. Julie felt her perfect morning crumbling around her, but she forced her voice to remain steady. That's not your choice to make, Anthony. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I'm a grown woman who can handle whatever comes. This isn't just gossip, Julie. This is federal investigation, prison sentences, career destruction. And you think I'm going to run the moment things get difficult? Anthony's expression cracked, showing the fear underneath his careful control. I think you deserve better than being dragged through hell because you made the mistake of caring about me. Julie stood up, wrapping his shirt more tightly around herself like armor. Don't you dare decide what I deserve. Don't you dare make this choice for me. Julie, no. Her voice was firm, final. Last night you told me you were falling in love with me. This morning you're pushing me away because loving you might be inconvenient. Which is it, Anthony? Anthony stared at her, his carefully constructed walls warring with everything he'd admitted in the darkness. Julie could see the moment he chose. Duty over desire, protection over love. I should go, he said quietly. Julie nodded, her throat too tight for words. She watched Anthony dress with mechanical efficiency, becoming CEO Anthony Bassett with each piece of his armor. When he was fully dressed, he paused at the bedroom door. Julie, I'm sorry. So am I. After Anthony left, Julie sat alone in his sterile penthouse, surrounded by the ghosts of the night before. Through the windows, Seattle sparkled in the morning sun, beautiful and indifferent to the way her world had just shifted on its axis. Sometimes falling in love was the easy part. It was the landing that destroyed you. The truth about ice is that it doesn't break, it transforms. And sometimes transformation is the most beautiful kind of breaking. 2 weeks had passed since the morning Julie's world had shifted on its axis. 2 weeks of FBI interviews, client meetings, and media speculation that painted Meridian Design Studios as either a victim of embezzlement or complicit in financial fraud. 2 weeks of watching Anthony from across the office, seeing him carry the weight of other people's mistakes with the same stoic grace he brought to everything else. 2 weeks of careful professional distance that felt like slow torture. Julie sat in the Meridian conference room at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, surrounded by bankers' boxes and financial documents that would determine the company's survival. The FBI had cleared Meridian of any wrongdoing, but 3 major clients had already jumped ship, and the board was pressuring Anthony to consider a merger with a larger firm. She was alone in the office except for the security guard and Anthony, who was locked in his office making calls to investors and legal teams. Through his glass walls, Julie could see him pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, his usually perfect appearance showing signs of strain. He looked exhausted. More than that, he looked broken in a way that had nothing to do with Davidson's betrayal and everything to do with the careful distance he'd maintained between them. Julie's computer chimed with an email from her sister. "Still coming to the wedding, Solo? Mom's starting to think you made him up." The wedding. Tomorrow afternoon, Julie would drive to Portland for 3 days of family celebration, questions about her love life, and pretending that her heart wasn't slowly breaking in a Seattle office building. She was reading through the Morrison Group contract modifications when Anthony's office door opened. He stood in the doorway, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You should go home," he said quietly. "It's late. So should you. I have calls to make. Investors to convince that Meridian is still a viable company." Julie saved her work and stood up, decision crystallizing in her mind like ice forming on a window. "Anthony, we need to talk." "Julie." "No, not boss to employee, not CEO to administrative coordinator, just us. We need to talk about us." Anthony's expression grew guarded, but he stepped back, allowing her into his office. The space was chaos, papers scattered across his usually pristine desk, coffee cups suggesting he'd been surviving on caffeine, his suit jacket draped over a chair in uncharacteristic disorder. "You look terrible," Julie said without preamble. "Thank you. That's exactly what my confidence needed. When did you last eat a real meal? Sleep for more than 4 hours? Take a shower that wasn't strictly functional?" Anthony's jaw tightened. "I don't have time for self-care, Julie. I have a company to save. And you think destroying yourself is going to accomplish that? I think keeping my distance from you is going to protect you from being dragged down with me." There it was, the fear that had been driving Anthony's behavior for 2 weeks. Julie stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that spoke of carrying too much alone. "What if I don't want to be protected? Julie, what if I want to be here fighting beside you instead of watching from a distance while you slowly kill yourself with guilt and responsibility?" Anthony was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. "You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Davidson stole $2 million under my watch. My leadership, my failure to see what was happening in my own company." Anthony's voice was rough with self-recrimination. "The FBI questioned everyone who worked closely with him. If they knew about us, about our relationship, they would have assumed you were involved. But I wasn't involved, and neither were you. That's not how public perception works. That's not how board members think when their investments are threatened." Anthony turned away from her, staring out at Seattle's evening skyline. "Do you have any idea what it would do to me if you got hurt because of my mistakes?" Julie felt something crack open in her chest at the raw pain in his voice. "Anthony, look at me." He turned slowly, and Julie saw past the CEO mask to the man underneath, vulnerable, terrified, carrying guilt that wasn't his to bear. "Davidson's choices are not your fault," she said firmly. "His betrayal doesn't make you a failure. And protecting me by pushing me away doesn't make you noble. It makes you a coward." Anthony flinched as if she'd slapped him. "Julie, no, let me finish. You told me you were falling in love with me. You asked me to stay. You made me believe that what we had was real, was worth fighting for. And the moment things got difficult, you decided I was too fragile to handle the truth. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to protect yourself." Julie stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. You were terrified that if I stayed, I might leave anyway when things got really bad, so you pushed me away first. Anthony's expression cracked, showing the fear underneath. Yes, I was terrified, because losing you would destroy me, and I've built my entire life on not being destroyed by anyone. The admission hung between them, raw and honest and devastating. Julie reached up to cup his face, her thumbs tracing the sharp line of his cheekbones. "Anthony Bassett," she said softly, "you are brilliant, successful, and completely stupid if you think I'm going anywhere. Julie, I love you." The words came out fierce and certain, cutting through his protests. "Not CEO Anthony, not the man with the perfect suits and the corner office. I love the man who teaches me about Italian coffee machines and admits his fears in dark restaurants. I love the man who holds me like I'm precious and kisses me like I'm the answer to questions he forgot he was asking." Anthony's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You love me? Desperately, completely, even when you're being an idiot who thinks protecting me means breaking both our hearts." Anthony's hands came up to cover hers, pressing her palms against his face. "I've been miserable without you." "Good. You deserve to be miserable." Anthony's laugh was shaky, but genuine. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." "Then stop being terrified and start being brave." Anthony leaned down to kiss her, and Julie felt 2 weeks of careful distance dissolve in the contact. This kiss was desperate and relieved and full of everything they'd been holding back. Anthony kissed her like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning like she was home and he'd been lost for years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I pushed you away. Don't do it again. Never, I promise, never again." Julie smiled, feeling her world realign itself around this moment. "Good, because I have a wedding to attend tomorrow and I need a date." Anthony's eyebrows rose. "You still want me to meet your family? After everything?" "Especially after everything. They need to know that the man I love is brave enough to fight for what matters." Anthony's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his entire face. "What if they hate me? They won't. But if they do, we'll handle it together." "Together? Together?" Anthony pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Julie? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me." Julie reached up to kiss him again, tasting promise and possibility on his lips. "Never. Even when you're being an idiot who thinks pushing me away is protecting me. Especially then." Outside the windows, Seattle sparkled in the evening darkness, beautiful and full of possibility. Inside Anthony's office, 2 people held each other and remembered what it felt like to be brave enough to love without reservation. The Ice King had melted, and in his place stood a man who was finally ready to let someone love him back. "So," Julie said, pulling back slightly to meet his eyes, "are you ready to meet my family?" Anthony's smile was pure mischief mixed with terror. "How bad can it be?" Julie laughed, the sound echoing through the empty office building. "Oh, you sweet, naive man. You have no idea what you've just signed up for. As long as I'm signing up for it with you, I can handle anything." And for the first time in weeks, Julie believed that was true. 6 months later, the morning light filtered through the windows of their shared apartment, no longer Anthony's sterile penthouse, but a space they'd created together. Books scattered across coffee tables, Julie's watercolor paintings gracing the walls, Anthony's camera equipment mingling with her art supplies in organized chaos that somehow made perfect sense. Julie stood at the kitchen window, watching Seattle wake up under a rare cloudless sky, her hands wrapped around a mug of perfectly brewed Italian coffee. The machine had been Anthony's first official contribution to their domestic life, along with a patient explanation of each button's purpose and the story behind every technique. "You're up early." Anthony's voice was warm with sleep as his arms encircled her waist from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. He smelled like soap and something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken even after 6 months of waking up beside him. Couldn't sleep, too excited. "About the Morrison project unveiling?" Julie leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "About everything." Today marked several milestones. The public unveiling of the Morrison Group development that had brought them together professionally, Meridian's full recovery from the Davidson scandal, and the 6-month anniversary of the night they'd stopped pretending their connection was purely professional. "How are you feeling about the ceremony?" Julie asked, turning in his arms. Anthony's smile was soft and genuine, the real smile she'd fallen in love with, not his polished CEO expression. Proud, grateful, slightly terrified that I'm going to trip walking across the stage. The Seattle Architecture Foundation was honoring Anthony with their Excellence in Leadership Award, recognizing not just Meridian's innovative designs, but his handling of the company crisis with integrity and grace. Julie knew he'd been reluctant to accept the recognition, still carrying guilt about Davidson's betrayal, but she'd convinced him that leadership wasn't about preventing every mistake. It was about how you handled the ones that happened anyway. "You won't trip," Julie said, reaching up to straighten his tie, deep burgundy silk that brought out the gold flecks in his grey eyes. "And even if you do, I'll still be proud of you, even if I faceplant in front of the entire Seattle business community. Especially then, it would make you more relatable." Anthony's laugh was genuine and unguarded, the sound that had become Julie's favorite music. "I love you. I love you too." The words came easily now, natural as breathing after months of learning to navigate love without walls between them. Anthony had kept his promise. No more pushing her away to protect her, no more carrying burdens alone. They'd faced the aftermath of the Davidson scandal together, weathered media scrutiny as a team, and emerged stronger for having fought side by side. Julie's phone buzzed with a text from Simone, watching the live stream from Portland. "Mom wants to know when you're making this official. Also, she's adopted Anthony. He's now her favorite child." Julie showed Anthony the message, watching his expression soften with the warmth that appeared whenever her family was mentioned. The wedding 6 months ago had been a revelation. Anthony charming her parents with genuine interest in their teaching careers, patiently answering her uncle's interrogation about his intentions, and earning permanent adoption when he'd spent an hour helping her 10-year-old cousin with a school project about architecture. "Your mother sent me cookies yesterday," Anthony said, reading over her shoulder. "Oatmeal chocolate chip?" With a note asking if I'm eating enough vegetables. Julie grinned. "She worries. You're officially part of the family now. Worrying comes with the territory. I still can't believe she made me a Christmas stocking, with your name embroidered in gold thread. She spent 3 weeks on that thing." Anthony's expression grew thoughtful as he gazed out at the Seattle skyline. "I never had that growing up. The worrying, the inclusion, the sense of belonging somewhere just because people love you." Julie studied his profile, reading the wonder that still appeared when he talked about her family's easy acceptance. Anthony's parents had died in a car accident when he was in college, leaving him with a trust fund, an architecture degree, and no one to worry if he ate vegetables or worked too many late nights. "You have it now," she said simply. "Yes, I do." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city come alive below them. Julie felt the same sense of rightness she'd experienced that first morning in Anthony's penthouse, but deeper now, more certain. This wasn't just passion or chemistry, this was partnership, the kind of love that grew stronger with time rather than burning out. "Julie?" "Yes?" Anthony's voice carried a note of nervousness that made her look up at him more carefully. His usual confidence seemed slightly shaken, his grey eyes bright with something that looked like anticipation mixed with terror. "There's something I want to ask you. After the ceremony tonight." Julie's heart did a small flip. "Anthony, not now. Later. When we're home and it's just us and I can do this properly." Anthony's hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "But I needed you to know. These 6 months have been the best of my life. You've made me better than I ever thought I could be." Julie felt tears prick her eyes at the raw honesty in his voice. "You've made me braver. We've made each other possible." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Julie reached up to kiss him, tasting coffee and forever on his lips. That evening, the Seattle Architecture Foundation Gala was held at the Museum of Flight, with the city's skyline providing a dramatic backdrop through floor-to-ceiling windows. Julie watched from the audience as Anthony accepted his award with characteristic grace, his speech focusing not on his own achievements, but on the team that made Meridian's success possible. "Great architecture isn't created by individuals," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. "It's created by people who see possibilities where others see problems, who solve puzzles others don't even notice, who transform chaos into harmony with quiet brilliance." His eyes found Julie's in the audience, and she felt her cheeks warm as she realized he was talking about her as much as architecture. "The best leaders don't just build structures," Anthony continued. "They build relationships, trust, and teams that can weather any storm. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, they find someone who teaches them that the strongest foundations are built on love." The applause was thunderous, but Julie barely heard it. She was too busy falling in love with Anthony Bassett all over again, this man who'd learned to be vulnerable in public, who'd credited their partnership in front of the entire Seattle business community, who'd somehow made an architecture award acceptance speech into a love letter. Later at home, they sat on their couch with takeout from Il Bistro. Marco had insisted on sending dinner to celebrate Anthony's award, complete with the same Chianti they'd shared on their first date. Julie was curled against Anthony's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them still glowing from the evening's success. "You were brilliant tonight," Julie said, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "I was terrified I'd forget my speech. You didn't need notes. You spoke from the heart." Anthony was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "Julie? Yes? Earlier, when I said I had something to ask you." Julie's heart began to race as Anthony shifted beside her, reaching into his jacket pocket. When he turned back to her, he was holding a small velvet box that made her breath catch. "Anthony, 6 months ago, you told me that ice doesn't break. It transforms. You were right." Anthony's voice was steady but emotional, his grey eyes bright with unshed tears. "You transformed me, Julie. Made me believe in love, in partnership, in the possibility of building something beautiful together." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took her breath away. A classic solitaire with a stone that caught the light like captured starfire, elegant and timeless and perfect. "Julie Andres," Anthony said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, solve puzzles with me, transform chaos into harmony with me for the rest of our lives?" Julie felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked at the man who'd started as the untouchable Ice King and become her partner, her love, her home. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Anthony's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the fit perfect, like everything else about them. Then he was kissing her, and Julie tasted promise and possibility, and forever on his lips. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply, "my brilliant, beautiful, extraordinary partner." "I love you too," Julie replied, admiring the way the ring caught the light. "My formerly frozen, completely thawed, perfectly imperfect fiancé." Outside their windows, Seattle sparkled in the darkness. The city that had brought them together now witness to their promise of forever. Inside their shared space, two people held each other and marveled at how love could transform everything. Ice into warmth, distance into intimacy, two separate lives into one beautiful whole. The Ice King had melted completely, and in his place stood a man ready to build the most beautiful architecture of all, a marriage based on love, trust, and the quiet magic of two hearts beating in perfect harmony. Sometimes the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone perfect for you, someone who sees your potential and loves you into becoming the best version of yourself. Julie and Anthony had found exactly that in each other. Final message: true love isn't about perfect people finding each other. It's about imperfect people choosing to grow together. Julie taught Anthony that vulnerability is strength, while Anthony showed Julie that she deserves to take up space and be cherished. Their story reminds us that the most beautiful transformations happen when someone sees past our walls and loves the person we're becoming. The Ice King melted not because he found someone to fix him, but because he found someone worth being brave for. And Julie discovered that sometimes the greatest risk is not protecting your heart, but opening it completely to someone who proves they're worthy of that trust. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it grows quietly in coffee breaks and late-night conversations, in small gestures and shared dreams. But when it's real, when it's right, it transforms everything it touches. Would you have been brave enough to fight for love when everything seemed to be falling apart? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.